and the C's have interest, or at least they will, in LaMarcus Aldridge if he hits the buyout market. So what are your I know you're all in on Collins, so am I, if that were to, actually become a realistic possibility. But it seems like the name everybody is defaulting to and have been for weeks is Harrison Barnes, despite how many times, formerly Boston's own Kyle Draper screams from Sacramento so loud that you can hear him from there that Harrison Barnes is not going to be traded and the Celtics are not going to trade for him. And it's just not going to happen. He's swung the other way. He's King's guy now, Kyle Draper. Is there something to that? Do you think he'll be moved? Do you think he'll be moved to Boston? Certainly Boston would be interested. Do you think that will happen? And, what is your view of the Aldridge situation?
So Barnes is just one of the overpay guys on the market right now. So you have to overpay his value. And so the question is it worth it? So right now, if they offered 2 first-round picks and one of their good young players, I think Sacramento would do the deal. I don't think they want to do that. I think they would rather just go, let's wait till the summer, see if Bradley Beal asks out, and then throw 7 first-round picks at Washington. And I agree with that. That's a much better plan. I think Harrison Barnes is a really good player. It would be an ideal fit for this team and would take this team from they're playing at like a 6 seed right now. And they probably would be playing at like a 3 seed or 2nd seed level, but they probably still wouldn't be as good as those top 3 teams at the top of the East. So it just wouldn't put them over the top enough that the opportunity cost would be worth it. But at the same time, not trading for Harrison Barnes right now puts all your chips into the basket of this very short window to pull off a mega trade for a player that you just don't even really know is going to be realistically available, and a player that you are probably competing with every other team in the NBA except for like the Lakers, basically, to try to get, or the Nets to try to get. Like there's like 26 teams in the NBA that will try to trade for Bradley Beal, and they don't have a super young star to offer. There's no point of trading Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum for him. You're not good if you only have 2 of those guys. You need all 3 of them if you want to be a great team. So there's no point of trading Jaylen Brown for any of these guys, even though what's really holding up a John Collins deal with Atlanta is that Atlanta's been asking for Jaylen Brown. They want to do a bigger trade surrounding Jaylen Brown. And obviously, unless they're going to throw in Trae Young, DeAndre Hunter, and John Collins, there's no point of trading Jaylen Brown. I wouldn't trade Jaylen Brown for Trae Young. Absolutely not, especially with this team. And DeAndre Hunter is really great, but even DeAndre Hunter and John Collins combined isn't enough for me to trade away a 24-year-old 2-way all-star who's starting to, is still like 3 years away from his prime. It's like, no, like that guy is way too valuable. Maybe Hunter turns into a really good player, but it's like Jaylen's so worth it. So the Celtics are just stuck in this weird limbo where they have guys that are too good to trade, and then a lot of guys that just aren't good enough to pull off the big trade. So that's the calculus in deciding whether to go for somebody like Harrison Barnes. They know that they can throw in like 8 assets, a crazy number of assets to go for a huge superstar in the offseason. And they're the ones that know whether that's probably going to be enough because they've been working the phones for a while. And like, as much as my sources might tell me from opposing teams, sometimes they are the ones in the trade negotiations, but like for the most part, they're kind of like working off of what they're hearing about the negotiations. While we know that Ainge and Zarin, those guys are literally in the negotiations and they have a much clearer sense of the market. So I think that's what's going to determine whether a Barnes deal gets done. Then as far as LaMarcus Aldridge, the Celtics aren't going to trade for him. You'd have to trade Kemba Walker for him or use up the TP on a floor spacing 36-year-old. So
not happening.
Yeah, LaMarcus Aldridge is not happening unless it's a buyout. If it's a buyout, maybe. But like we just spent the first half of the show talking about how they have a pretty solid 3-man rotation at the 5 spot. Why would you bring in another one of these guys? Just because isn't he shooting like 36.5% from 3 this year? It's not even like he's lighting it up. He's good, but like he's not that good. So I don't see them as a contender for LaMarcus Aldridge, really. And then I forget who was the other player that we were talking about for this question.
Well, the other one was John Collins, who obviously, at that point in time, you will disrupt your big man rotation.
And that's fine. He's worth it. I'm pretty sold that he's someone that would really thrive in this system. So I think he's totally worth throw in the kitchen sink at.
I mean, we'll see. I think you have to say bye to some other guys, though, if you bring John Collins on, because that extension is really pricey. I think, I would just trust Ryan Bernardoni more than myself in terms of, cap crunching numbers and figuring out down the line what that means. I think the John Collins thing is interesting, but that might be there in the offseason anyway. So, we'll see how that goes. I agree with you, though. I don't think there's really I just don't see there's a trade that they can make that puts them on Brooklyn's level, and that's just going to make a lot of people very angry because they want to use this TPE now instead of wait for the summer. And I know people want to get excited about the Bradley Beal thing, but that only happens if he's like, I'm only going to Boston, I don't want to play here, because everybody else is going to try and trade for Bradley Beal and has much more to offer. The one thing that does help Boston is there have been so many first round draft picks traded recently that they're one of the few teams that has the full war chest of first round draft picks that they personally own. So that would be a benefit there. But I just, I think this team is going to be, and unfortunately, I think people are kind of mad at it. It's well, they've been to the Eastern Conference Finals so many times already. They have to do a move to get over the hump. It's yeah, well, that move might not be right now. You have to remember, Jalen and Jason are still in their young 20s. A lot of guys don't win the title until late 20s, early 30s when they're superstars. I mean, look at Durant, look at Steph Curry. I mean, look at all these guys that took till age 26 and after.
MJ and LeBron.
Right. So, I mean, people are in such a rush because, I think part of it has to do with the whole NBA landscape of how people are moving all the time. So I think Boston fans are somewhat scared that Jalen and Jason, if we don't get a title now, they're going to be gone and they'll have nothing to show for it. Everybody relax for just a second. Everybody relax, please. I know people have that fear, but I mean, Jalen just signed an extension last year and Jason just signed his this year. And I think Jalen's just kicked in. Jason doesn't kick in until next season. So there's time. Everybody relax. I know the cap gets different and all that stuff, but just there's still, the window is still there. I think people got scared, and I'm not trying to call out Bill Simmons or anything, but people are like, oh, the Celtics missed their window last season. I'm like, wait a minute, what? What are we talking about? They had an opportunity.
I think people are petrified that Danny Ainge is going to let this TPE expire. That's really what this is.
I don't think they're going to let it expire. That'd be ridiculous. I think they'll eventually make a move. But I think that if you look at the landscape, the fact that nobody's really available unless you want to overpay, and we know Danny Ainge doesn't like to do that. Mike Zarin doesn't like to do that. Zarin likes to hold on to draft picks, further down the road because he knows, the cap implications better than anybody else. So I get why people are nervous, and I'm just telling you, it's probably more likely than not they're not going to make a huge deal here. But